Welcome to Blank Tape. I'm Kurt.
And I'm Anson, and this is Volume 1, Track 12. Hey Siri, make me an app.
Recorded on Thursday, November 15th, 2018. Put on your headphones and let's jam. So what's up?
Oh, it's, this is our Thanksgiving episode, so let us give thanks for another Blank Tape coming down the wire.
Awesome. I've got my bottle of Shiner homespun cream ale to drink while we talk tonight.
Oh, nice. Is that good? I've always wanted to try it. I haven't gotten around to it yet.
Yeah, it's good. It's creamy. It's ale-y. So,
Is
born
it like,
in America.
Does it remind you of like cream soda or what?
Let's see. This is what it says on the bottle. Born in America, brewed in Shiner. Our cream ale is inspired by classic American recipes in homespun in Shiner, Texas. It's brewed with an extra helping of specialty wheat malt to give it a velvety, smooth, creamy mouthfeel. Pale golden color, homespun is a sessionable go-to brew with a crisp, refreshing finish. So pop one open and join us in celebrating American brewing tradition with a dash of Southern hospitality from Shiner, Texas. Prosit, y'all.
All right. I'll buy it. All right.
It's not bad. It's serviceable.
Cool. Good deal. Well, I actually, you can give thanks because I actually did my homework this time.
Oh, awesome.
Yes, I listened to the rap battles that I had to do from several episodes ago.
From the summer?
Yeah, from probably a few months ago by now, yeah.
Yeah.
You assigned Tolkien versus George R.R. Martin and Spielberg versus Hitchcock. I think the Tolkien versus George R.R. Martin was definitely very funny. And I also definitely think that Tolkien won that one.
Yeah.
And then the Spielberg-Hitchcock one was fun. I thought Michael Bay saying, "I got no time to read reviews, I'm too busy writing the sequel," was very funny.
Yeah.
So, very good. Those were good recommendations. And then the other piece of homework that I had was to do something D&D related, and I have started watching the Harry Potter Schmogwarts one-shot from Critical Role.
Awesome.
That's been a lot of fun. Yeah. It's about 3 hours long, and I have watched maybe 30 minutes of it or so over the last few days. They are still in the middle of their first fight.
Okay.
So, yeah.
They're fighting all the little fairies from the cage.
Right. Or as the one guy called it, the 8-pack of sprites. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, so very reminiscent of Chamber of Secrets, how Gilderoy Lockhart's like, look, I have these little fairies, and then they spring out of the cage and they start attacking everyone.
Yeah. So that's as far as I am right now. It's very funny, and I've been enjoying it. But it'll take me a little...
Yeah, how each one of them has been one of the Breakfast Club characters.
Yeah, I've never seen the movie, unfortunately. So,
what?
Yeah, it's on the list.
Anson. Well, I think I was listening to some of our episodes, and I think there's some movies that you're missing on your letterbox. So you'll have to add Breakfast Club, and I think there was one other one. Oh, Trading Places. You hadn't added yet on your list.
Okay, yeah. Let me write that down before I forget.
Yeah, and actually, Trading Places kind of works as a Christmas movie. Well, it takes place around the Christmas holidays. So
kind of like Die Hard as a Christmas movie.
Exactly, and anyone who says different is wrong.
It's one of my goals to see if I can convince Elvia to watch Die Hard with me this holiday season.
We should watch Die Hard when we come to hang out with you.
Yeah, that would do it, yeah.
Yeah? Play some games, watch Die Hard, it'll be great.
Yep.
We'll go to the coast, we'll have some laughs.
All right.
Sorry, that's a quote from the movie.
All right, I had a feeling. All right, so we have a news tidbit of the week up next, and my tidbit is blank because I couldn't think of anything in time.
Sure.
But we can share yours because yours is a good one.
Yeah, just a couple days ago, 3 days ago, we have to mourn the passing of our beloved Stan Lee of Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
So it was the day after Veterans Day, which, by the way, Mr. Lee was a veteran. He was a playwright in the Army. And so, yeah, he made it the day after. He made it through the day after Veterans Day, and he was just a month and 16 days shy of his 96th birthday.
Wow.
He was preceded in death by his wife, Joan, who he was married to for all their lives together in a married life. And I believe Stan Lee is survived by 2 daughters. So, but yeah, it's definitely sad. He's a hero to everyone. He was, I don't know. Basically, I think of Stan Lee as like America's grandpa. It's a tie between him and Mr. Rogers, to be honest. It's like Stan Lee is like your America's grandpa, but on mom's side of the family. And then Mr. Rogers is America's grandpa, but on like dad's side of the family.
Yeah.
So there you go. You've got your 2 grandpas that help raise you right, America. And so we just lost we finally lost our other grandpa. So
yeah, I was pretty sad about it. It's a bummer.
But I'm told that he did make already film his cameos. I'm hoping he got his cameos in for Captain Marvel, and they did say he did get his cameo in for Avengers 4. So we still will get to see Stan Lee make his signature cameo appearances, unless the estate of Mr. Stan Lee agreed to have his digital presence, owned by the studio, in which case we might see a possible computer animated Stan Lee show up or something.
That'll be funny.
It would be funny. It'd make you remember, like, oh, he passed away, and now they have to, like, computer animate him superimpose his face onto somebody else. But
yeah, I hope they do it from far away, and so it looks better than the cameos in like Rogue One and stuff.
Oh, you mean like with Grand Moff Tarkin?
Like Leia, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, because Grand Moff,
that's right.
Yeah, Grand Moff Tarkin. He was also because Peter Cushing was, had passed away in the 90s, and he was a major figure in Rogue One.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
From the Imperial side.
Mm-hmm. All right. So anyway, it's the holidays are nearing, and so we had a mini topic I wanted to kind of get out of the way just for fun.
Oh, sure.
What are your thoughts on when it comes to trees that you put in your house? What are your feelings on real versus artificial?
Artificial all the way.
Really? Why?
Because you grow up with cats, and cats like to crawl in things and eat things, and I'd rather them, not get sick or something because they, ate real pine needles, or, there was some sort of termite or bug or something that burrowed its way into a real tree, and also, won't be a fire hazard too much. So yeah, just it's easier, and also you can pack it up. You spend the money. You spend like a large chunk of money probably at one time, but you'll that tree will last you several years, and you'll get your money's worth out of it. So
yeah, I think we are recent converts to artificial trees. We've been getting real trees for all of my life, and growing up, I was like, oh, we'll never get a fake tree. But Elvia too, her family the same thing. But this year we were like, well, it's always a mess. There's always pine needles everywhere, and
right.
We have dogs, and it's like, well, if we can just get something that's not a live like outdoor thing, and maybe they won't they'll just ignore it, and that's work.
Right.
They just kind of it doesn't smell like anything, so they just ignore it. And Herbie does like to kind of chew on tinsel sometimes. So we got to keep an eye out for that. But yeah, so we used to name our trees Elizabeth, or we gave them English king and queen names for some reason. I think it was because we were watching The Crown together on Netflix at one point.
Oh, okay.
And that was right when we got one of our Christmas trees, so we named it Elizabeth, and then we had one that was named Richard and stuff. But yeah, I don't think we've named this one. But yeah, so we're in the artificial camp now.
Well, we just spent $200 on 2 different artificial trees in our place. If you saw the pictures I put up on Facebook and Twitter, because my mother-in-law works at a resale shop there in Lone Oak, and she just texted Casey or called her and was like, "Hey, Christmas trees came into the shop. Do you want them? I'll set them aside." And so $200 later, we now have 2 Christmas trees with us trying to figure out where the heck we're going to stuff them when we're done with them, which is why the Christmas trees went up early, which if, you want to tag on to this mini topic of, because you have a bubble here of when to decorate. I am strictly in the camp of you do not start decorating for Christmas until Advent has begun, which is typically after Thanksgiving.
Right.
And I know in this country, what really grinds my gears is the Christmas creep and how retailers are pushing Christmas sooner and sooner. They'll start Christmas stuff in July, if they would have it that way. But because we had these 2 trees, we needed to get the gigantic boxes out of the apartment.
Right.
Casey was like, "I'm going to set them up. And the compromise is that we won't put ornaments on them until after Thanksgiving." So I was like, okay.
That's fair.
I'm okay with it. That's fair. So we just have 2 Christmas trees up. They just have their built-in lights on them, no ornaments. 2
full-size trees, or like one smaller, or what?
Oh no, these are like full regular-sized Christmas trees. Because if you remember, I had like a 4-foot tree that I got from my parents when I went to college. That way I'd have a Christmas tree. Mm-hmm. But that one got thrown in the trash after last Christmas because it was on the end of its life there. So, but yeah, now we have 2 full trees, and the justification is 2 trees cost us $200, but we probably saved several $100s if we had bought brand new trees, and we'll be able to get a couple years out of these before they become decrepit and fall apart.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
We put ours up, decorations and all, a weekend ago or a couple weekends ago. I'm not sure.
Oh man.
Yeah, we were in the mood, so we were like, oh, it's Halloween's over. It's time. So we put up the tree. We got an official tree with lights in it and everything. So we put it up, put the ornaments on it. We decorated the apartment a little bit. I'm gonna put up some Christmas lights in the bedroom. We like to put little rainbow colored lights in there just for fun. I think I might even take some lights to work and put on my desk just for fun, and a little Christmas tree or something too. But I'm gonna wait till after Thanksgiving for that probably. But yeah.
Yeah, and the question, of course, I know we've talked about it, but I know our annual thing every Christmas tends to be that we do an ornament exchange. I know we used to buy each other Christmas presents all the time, but now that we're married and we have wives controlling the purse strings, as it were, we can't buy each other extravagant gifts like we used to. So I was thinking maybe this year to commemorate our first season, volume 1 of us, starting this podcast and actually sticking with it. Maybe this year for the Christmas ornament exchange, we could just do we could get our new Christmas version of our logo done up on like a custom ornament or something, and then we would each have one, and it would commemorate the year that we started the podcast.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. That'll be a lot of fun.
And that, kids, is why that ridiculous ornament is on the tree, and you must never touch it, and it must never be destroyed.
But Dad,
no buts.
All right.
So what are we diving into today? Now, speaking of computers and all the technical difficulties I've had, computers, am I right?
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it. Technology these days, man.
Yeah.
So the topic of the day is kind of computer science in general and software development. And we've had some Kurt sponsored episodes where he took us through a tour of Dungeons and Dragons and the Marvel Cinematic Universe and everything. So it's my turn to talk your ear off, and we're going to get right into the adventures of computer science and stuff.
All right, sounds good.
So the first thing up I have is a couple of little disclaimers.
Sure.
The first one is, why are we talking about computer science? There's kind of the trope or the stereotype of who does a podcast these days? Two white guys talking to each other about computers and stuff. And so I just thought it was funny. I wanted to kind of call that out. And so, I think we're doing a pretty good job of hopefully breaking that mold a little bit, because we have the focus on being kind of like a time capsule and talking about all sorts of things. And
right.
I don't want to make it seem like I guess I'm trying to say I'm not like a dude tech bro. I don't know. So,
dude, bro, did you see those gigahertz? Oh yeah, bro, the RAM on that is sick, man.
So yeah, there are some parts of like startup culture and Silicon Valley culture that I don't think are very are totally positive.
But have you watched that show?
Silicon Valley, the TV show, is fantastic.
I've only watched like the first episode or two. So.
Oh, it's good. You should watch all of it.
Well, it's a Mike Judge show, so I know the comedy's well done.
Yeah, it's very funny. So it's a good one. Yeah, the what's his face? Not Martin Freeman. Oh gosh.
The guy in all the Verizon commercials?
No, not that guy.
T.J. Miller.
No. Martin. Oh gosh.
Kunail Nanjiani.
No.
Martin Starr.
Martin Starr is he's really funny. He's one of our favorite characters in it. He was in a TV show that we watched called Party Down, which was like on Stars and then on Netflix for a little while, and now it's kind of like disappeared because nobody has Stars or anything.
Right.
But it was an old TV show about a catering company in LA, and he was on there. It was really funny.
Yeah. Well, he was also in Freaks and Geeks too.
Yes, which I have also never seen.
Put it on your list, dude.
All right. So, anyway, Adam Scott was also in Party Down, as was Lizzie Kaplan from Mean Girls. But
yeah.
Okay, moving on. That's not what we're talking about here. So yeah, it's computer science is my job, and I'm proud of it. And so that's why we're gonna step into the stereotype a little bit and be two white guys talking about computers for a little bit. The other disclaimer. Yeah. Sorry, were you gonna say something or?
Oh, I was just gonna say, as a disclaimer, like, the only computer science I have is from high school when I did a Java C++ class. So I know my way around a computer to make it do what I want to do. But if you try to ask me, like, to go into the matrix, like, you're going to lose me. So
was that Mr. Patterson's class?
Yeah, Mr. Patterson, who had the cardboard cutouts of the Three Stooges and stuff.
Did what was the actual class he took? Was it AP Computer Science?
No, it was just like a Java C++ class.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, like, I did very basic computer stuff. I think I ended up getting like a B in that class.
Well, it's better than a C++, that's for sure. But that's cool. I didn't know y'all did C++ because in the AP, I took the official AP Computer Science A or whatever it's called. I don't know. There were a couple of them, and all we did was Java. I think. I don't think we did C++ until college. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, my second disclaimer is this is going to be heavily skewed towards Apple because I am a iOS developer, meaning I make the company that I work for makes apps for iPhones and iPads. And so that's what I know. That's the world that I live in. And so that's the way this is going to be skewed. If you have complaints about that, please feel free to email my co-host, Kurt, and tell him how you feel. But don't tell me.
Yeah, and like I've said before in the past, like, the only Apple stuff I really care about is my iTunes and, like, my iPhone working. So that's about the extent of Apple loyalty that I have.
That's all good. So, kind of the topics we touched on it in our previous hidden track a little bit, but the overall topics I'm going to go over is you asked the question, why do we care about apps? So I'm going to brief history of apps. Why do we care about apps? A day in the life of a software developer, and then like how apps get made in general, like how it all comes together.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds cool.
So for a very quick history, the iPhone. Apple's cell phone came out in 2007. It originally did not support any kind of app store or anything. What was on the phone when you got it, and that was it. And it had, you can recognize the home screen because it looks the same. It was, a bunch of little square icons on a little grid, and those icons were just kind of a convenient way to access the various features of your phone. Text messages and email and stuff. Like many cell phone menus. I had a cell phone menu where you could either put it in a grid or a list. It was the same thing. Just like a bunch of little icons for stuff. And Steve Jobs famously didn't want there to be an app store or anything. He said, "Oh, if you want to have your own app on the iPhone, just write a web app." So you could use the Safari, the browser, to go to a website, and that was good enough for him as far as a third-party app.
Interesting.
Yeah. So 2007, iPhone comes out. 2008, only about a year later, the iPhone SDK was announced, and SDK is a software development kit. So what that means is it's a set of programs and tools for people to make their own apps for something. And so a couple months later after that, the App Store officially launched in July 2008. That's when people could start going online and buying their own apps and stuff, and there were about 500 apps in the App Store on that first day. A couple of years later, and at first the operating system on the phone was just called iPhone OS. In 2010, a few years later, it was renamed iOS for short, and Apple actually had to license the name from Cisco because they had some network device called iOS with capital I, but of course the Apple version is lowercase I, capital OS, and OS meaning operating system, and operating system being the code and programs necessary to make the hardware do something useful. So without the operating system, you just have a camera, a screen, a touch screen, and the speakers and stuff. But the operating system is what ties it all together and lets you do stuff on it. So the next question is, why do we care about these apps? Why does it matter? And there's a business answer for it, and the business answer is Apple is a hardware company primarily, so they sell phones, iPads, and computers, and the software is kind of like a secondary thing. It's like, if you buy, I had a guest just walk into my studio. What's up?
Oh, boy.
I just want to say hi.
You want to say hi to everybody?
Hi, Elvia.
Who's everybody?
Just Kurt and all the listeners.
Okay. Hi.
Say hi to Poland and Argentina.
All right, she's leaving.
Okay.
All right. So
you've told her the one day that she and Casey are gonna do their takeover episode, right?
Oh yeah, it's gonna happen. They're gonna kick us out, and then they're gonna record their own episode.
Yep, that'd be fun.
All right, so Apple's primary business is selling the hardware, and the software is like, buy our hardware, and you can use all the cool apps that run on our hardware. And so these days they are trying to increase their services revenue, and what that means is like selling subscriptions to like iCloud data storage. Kind of like you have Dropbox, you can pay for more storage. Apple's digital ecosystem is called iCloud, and you can buy more storage on there if you have a lot of email or pictures or something you want to back up. So anyway, it's a benefit. They can sell more hardware if they have interesting things to do with their hardware, and so opening it up to the wide world of developers kind of incentivizes people to make cool apps because it's a cool device, and then people want to buy those cool apps, and so it sells more phones, so there's like a business answer to it.
Interesting.
Yeah,
because it's like Microsoft, from what I understand, went the opposite direction, where Microsoft was more like, no, it's software that does the selling, not necessarily the hardware.
Right, so that's why you have tons of PC manufacturers, Dell, Lenovo, HP, and all this kind of stuff, and they license Microsoft Windows and stuff, but Microsoft doesn't sell computers itself. That's why the Surface tablets are such a big, interesting deal when they started making those, because it's like, Microsoft is making their own hardware. Oh, it's crazy, so.
Well, and Microsoft went into the video game market because they started making Xboxes and stuff.
Yeah. So
Apple still hasn't made a video game system yet that I know of.
Nope, they have not. Not unless you count the Apple TV, which is a very weak, not really a video game system, although you can play games on it, sort of. Well, you can, but anyway, so so there's kind of the hardware money selling reason, and there's also the simple reason that if you want if your goal is to have as many cool apps as possible, Apple is a company of, a certain number of people, but the world is a much bigger place. And so if you have everybody in the world trying to make apps, you're going to have more better apps, just because of numbers, so I think we were talking about Twitter clients being an interesting place. There was a news tidbit that I had several months ago of how Twitter was shutting off their API for third-party clients, meaning that if you wanted to make your own Twitter app, it was going to be much harder to do that.
Right.
And I was saying during that part that Twitter clients were a big part of innovation on the App Store, because it was like, if I want to, people always, the joke is that whenever you want to learn a new programming language or something, the first thing you'll do is what's called a hello world. Well, you'll just make the computer say hello world. If you can get the computer to print out something on the screen, then you've succeeded. And so kind of like the hello world for an iOS app was like, oh, let me try making a Twitter client where you talk to the internet, you read the tweets, you get someone to type in their info and log in, and you post tweets. It's kind of like a back and forth with the internet. So it was a fun way to try your hand at making a cool iOS app, and then you could explore interesting ways of interacting and stuff. And what's interesting about that is the pull to refresh. If I say pull to refresh, do you know what that means?
How fast the data can get to your phone or computer from the vastness of the internet?
That's like pull syncing or something, but pull to refresh is the idea, if you're in the mail app, for example, and you scroll all the way to the top, and then you scroll a little bit more, it'll do a little spinner and refresh.
Oh, right, yeah.
That technique, that little UI user interface interaction was invented by somebody who wrote a third-party Twitter app. So,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so somebody not at Apple wrote an app, and they just said, oh, this would be a very convenient way. I don't need to have a refresh button on my screen. I can just make it so you just flick your thumb downwards, and it'll refresh and pull new stuff from the top. And so it's it's a cool way to get more ideas from the community. And so, yeah. Kind of another business aspect is that it's an easy way for customers to interact with an easy way for companies to interact with their customers. Phones are very personal devices. You have them on yourself all the time, and if a company can be present on your phone in your pocket 24/7, that's a big marketing or opportunity for them. It's easy to say, oh, download our app and get our coupons and stuff. So it's there's an incentive there. Another interesting topic that I think is an interesting sort of thing is how Apple got started with iTunes first, and so they had this the music store. And they were champions of this, don't get your music illegally. Don't worry about getting a virus if you use Napster and download an MP3. It's actually a fake file and it's just silence and it has a virus or whatever. Pay 99 cents and get the actual song. No muss, no fuss. And so because of iTunes, Apple already had a lot of credit card data for customers stored up and saved. And so when they launched the App Store, it's well, we already have your credit cards. Why not pay 99 cents for this app while you're at it? And so it kind of made it more commonplace to pay for software, to pay for an app on your phone. And I think this is a big reason why this reduced friction is a big reason why Apple's App Store is a place where you want to be if you want to sell apps and make money. But other places such as maybe the Androids or Google Play stores, they are not as big on selling things. They just want free apps, So it's because of this easy frictionless way to get started with paying for stuff.
Right. If they've already got you hooked on one thing, then it's easier to hook you on the other things too.
Yeah.
iTunes, the gateway drug.
Gateway to all kinds of digital content, I guess.
Yep.
So there's also the human answer. It's just fun to have your own set of apps, to personalize your phone and say, oh, I have this fun app. Oh, what apps do you have? It's just kind of fun. And then kind of the downside of apps is that Apple has a burden to police their App Store. And you can't just put any old thing in the App Store. You have to submit your thing through App Store review. And if you want to actually put something on the App Store, you have to sign up for an Apple developer account, which is $100 a year. And then what that gets you is you get to put your apps on the store, for free after that. But they have to be reviewed. So a human sits down, looks at your app, runs it, reads your marketing material, reads your description, and says, is this a spam app? Is it inappropriate content? Is it classified? Is it the right kind of app? Does it work? Does it crash? And they'll do an actual test of everything, and then they will say, you're good to go or you're not good to go. And so this takes time and resources, so Apple has to like maintain all this kind of stuff. They have to fight spam, um, and they don't do it. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm surprised that they actually flag inappropriate apps. So, I mean, because I'm just trying to think of all the, the adult things that exist on the internet and how easy it is to get to them, from, certain apps or avenues. But they actually have reviewers that are, I mean, do they mark them as like explicit that you can't ever get them, or they're like, no, this app will never see the light of day?
There are some guidelines, and it's like there is a if it's like, let's say like YouTube or something, or let's say you make a web browser. If you have a web browser, you can do anything on the internet. So it's like you can access things on the internet that might be age restricted, but it's not like the app itself is like a age restricted thing. So they'll flag the app as like allows access to the internet. Or if the actual app itself has like a rating to it, they will give it a rating. It's like appropriate for 7 or up, or appropriate for whatever ages or whatever. And so it'll say like includes, if it's a violent video game, it'll say like includes violence and stuff. So yeah, you dig around in some games, you'll see like the ratings and stuff. There's that, and other app stores don't always do this. I think Google started doing it for their Google Play. They might be doing some review now, but I know when the early days of like the Google Play Store and stuff, there was no review process. You just like submitted your app and that was that. So easy to upload any kind of like viruses or malicious trackers and all this kind of stuff. Apple doesn't do a perfect job, but there are often stories of like spam apps that'll like, you install them and you run them, and then they'll say, oh, do you want to subscribe to our app? And then you'll like say yes, whatever, I don't care. And then they'll like start charging you like $100 a year for this like stupid, like unit converter app or something, and you have to like go cancel your subscription and everything. So there are ways to like be scammy about it, but yeah. So
interesting.
You think that covers like why we care about apps? Does that kind of give a good summary, you think, or?
Yeah, no, it's just interesting how the beginning is like, oh, it's just a little picture to help you quickly access the basic functions of the phone. And then they were like, well, wait, what if somebody else comes up with something cool, and then that becomes a picture on your phone and it accesses a program? So it's it's just kind of interesting how that started off, and I guess you could see Mr. Jobs' influence in it and just be like, let other people make the apps. We don't have to be responsible. So if someone wants to make a game, or they want to make a currency converter or whatever else, then let them do it, which is interesting.
Yeah, I wonder how that whole decision process went down. But yeah. So let's see. So next up is the day in the life of a software developer. And so the question is, what's my job? My job title is iOS developer. You can also say software developer. You can say software engineer. Engineer is a little bit more controversial, because if you're an actual like physical engineer, then you have to like be licensed and stuff to like do your engineering. But for software engineering, you get the job, then you're an engineer. So. I prefer to say developer just because it doesn't carry the connotation. I'm not a licensed, I'm not a licensed civil engineer or anything. I'm just like a code guy. So,
right. Could you get a license from Apple though to say that you are an engineer?
There are some companies that'll do that for you. Not Apple, I don't think, but like independent like testing firms or something. You can go and say like, oh, I want to get certified, and you'll take some test or whatever, and they'll give you a certificate. But I have never seen.
Shiny.
Say again.
I was just saying shiny.
Yeah, put it up on your wall. But I've never seen a job posting or heard anybody say, I had to get this to get a job or anything. It's not really a thing.
Okay.
So what's my job? My job is mainly driven by some kind of task management or project management system. And this means like some way for somebody to specify problems to fix or things to do, and you can call these things tickets or issues or cases. And so there'll be a bug report, meaning something doesn't work the way it's supposed to, or a crash report, meaning the app crashes during something. Could be a feature idea from a customer, from a beta tester. It could be a feature idea from the executives who are planning what the next 2 years of the app or 5 years of the app are going to look like, or what are the big features we want to do, and could be something from the project managers who say, okay, here's how we're going to get this major feature broken down and going to build on it. So it's, generally things are either a bug fix or an improvement, like a new thing or something that's fixing something that's already existing.
Okay.
And it's very important to do a good mix of both. If all you do is new things, then you have a lot of things that might not be working because you don't ever fix bugs, But if
Right.
all you do is ever fix bugs, you'll never have anything new. So you got to balance it out.
Okay.
You usually work on teams. If you have a large enough company, you'll have a team. The team that I work on is, I call it a vertical team. And what that means is that there are different kinds of people on the team. So there is some developers, some iOS developers like me. And then there are some server developers, people who work on the server components, meaning the stuff that runs on the internet and the stuff that we kind of like, we from the app request from the internet and the internet gives us back to some stuff. There are designers who sketch out the user interface and figure out how it's all going to look and how it's going to work together. There are project managers, people who kind of organize things and say what's the next priority and who's going to do what. There's QA, quality assurance. They go and test everything to make sure it's all working before it gets actually released. And so the benefits of having a vertical team like that means that we sit in the same room with the product person who says, okay, this is important, let's do it. And then you can talk to the server guy and get what you need from him. You can send it to the QA guy and get what you need from him, and you can all work together really well. And so if you have like a small little vertical team, I think is very ideal. Versus like if it was like 20 iOS developers, and then you're like, oh, I guess I'll have to go ask some random server person. I don't know. I'm gonna see who's available that day to help me with something, And you just walk over to the group of server developers, and you walk over to the little place. So, yeah.
They're like, why'd you bump into my desk? Why are you bothering me?
So there are different ways that teams can be run. There are some fancy buzzwords like agile or scrum, or sprints or Kanban or Kanban. I don't really know how you say it, but so these just mean various ways of organizing the team and like kind of separating the work into chunks. And sprints are a very popular way to do it. And what that means is you'll set up your tasks for maybe like a 2-week period, and you'll say, okay, for these 2 weeks, this is everything my team's going to try to do. And you just kind of like shut off everything else and focus only on those tasks for 2 weeks. And at the end of the sprint, you have an end of sprint meeting, and you say, how did we do? Did we get everything done? Did we run out of things to do? Can we do more next time? And you kind of like reevaluate, and then you adjust, and you have another 2 weeks of like focused work. That worked pretty well for us for a while, but our team has grown a little bit, and like priorities change pretty quickly. So, 1 week it'll be, oh, we need to try to get this thing in for this show or this convention, and next week is, this crazy bug came up, we need to fix it. And so we kind of have a more flexible approach these days, where we don't specifically focus on like, oh, we're only going to do these things for 2 weeks, period, and then we'll talk about it later. It's like, okay, well, we have a vague idea, or we have an idea of what the most top priorities are, and we kind of like we split up our time however we can to like make sure everything gets done on time. So that works pretty well. So what are the tools of the trade? So I sit down, I take my laptop, I open it up, plug it into my monitor, and what comes up? Well, there's Xcode. That's just Xcode. That's for writing code. It's Apple's software development tool. It's also called IDE, which means Integrated Development Environment. And I hope I got the acronym correct because I did not look it up for the show. But that just means it's what you do to write your code and to run it and to build it and test it and everything.
Okay.
It's actually free if you can go to Apple's website and download it all you want and play with it and make your own iOS apps if you want to, but you have to have a Mac.
Aww.
Yeah. There are other tools you can use to kind of like make Mac apps, and I wanted to mention this at some point, but there's kind of a whole concept of native versus like a web app sort of thing. So you can,
are we getting into New York gangs of New York territory here?
potentially. So if there's a company like who needs to very quickly get their app in front of as many people as possible, they might go for a web app or like a quote write once, run anywhere, or build for everywhere solution. And what that means is like it's just a special app building tool where you can like write your code once and then you hit a big button. and it produces like an iOS app and a Android app and another app, And because those things are more generic, they're often a little more fidgety, and I don't think they make as reliable apps as a pure native app. And a pure native app means made using Xcode for Apple devices, or made using Android Studio for Android. It's like more specific to that platform.
Okay.
You can probably tell the difference if you have an app on your phone like that you open and maybe it doesn't look like a native iOS app. Native apps are like open up mail or messages. They have that same kind of look.
Right.
Very standard components, nothing like too fancy or anything. So I personally think native apps are better because they're more tightly integrated with the system, more powerful, kind of cleaner and stuff. And that's what we have the luxury of being able to do at my company. We don't have an Android app at all, so we just focus solely on iOS. So we use Xcode for everything.
Okay, so it's like if an analogy out there. So it's like I could write a program to make any kind of hamburger I want. But if I'm trying to release hamburgers for McDonald's, Burger King, and Whataburger, they're not going to taste the same or as great as if I had just only made a McDonald's hamburger or a Whataburger hamburger or a Burger King hamburger.
Right. You're going to be serving a generic hamburger to all three instead of a specialized hamburger for every single one.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And we don't want generic burgers. We want specialized, super tasty McDonald's burger, all from McDonald's. So...
Remember, we're trying to go for the Whataburger money.
Oh,
so
sorry.
we want a delicious A1 Thick and Hearty is what we want.
Yeah, none of that In-N-Out business. So the other cool thing is that Xcode comes with a simulator, so you can run an app on your computer in a little window that's simulates an iPhone or an iPad, which is pretty cool. Sometimes I will use an external text editor, like BBEdit or Atom or Vim. Just to edit a text file if you want to do something quick, but Xcode is the big one that does most of the work. And I'm gonna move one of this node down here. I'm gonna put it into a different order really quick.
Okay.
And so, how do you manage? The question is, if we have, the company that I work for has about 150 people or so. So how do you manage? One set of code with all those people? Well, use something called a VCS, which is a version control system. And the one that we use is called Git. It's very popular. There are some alternatives such as SVN or Mercurial. But Git is it's the one we use, and it's my favorite thing. I think it's a ton of fun to use. And the way it works is that on your computer, you'll have a Git repository, which is just a folder that contains a copy of your code and all the history of how all that code was ever changed. And so you begin by checking out a certain version, and a version is called, a sequence of versions is called a branch. And so you'll check out the master branch, for example. And what you can do then is start doing your changes. And so you'll change your files, maybe change the color of something, change the size, change the text or whatever. And you commit it, and that means that you select the changes that you made, and it compares them to the previous version because, again, it has all the history saved too. And so you can say, yes, I want to make these changes, and you you write a little message that says what you did, and you hit the button, and it adds your name, email, and the date to your changes, and it embeds it as part of the history. And so then anybody who goes and checks out the master branch again will see what you did to it last, and you'll have all your changes in there. And so it's a way to produce kind of a history of how it works and stuff. And what you can do is do what's called you make a branch for yourself or for your feature. And so let's say you have something that's going to take a while to develop. You want to kind of keep your changes separate from everything else. It's a work in progress. So you're not immediately going to commit your changes to the master branch. You're going to create a separate branch for maybe called My Awesome Feature. And then you're going to commit your things to My Awesome Feature. And then somebody else can come along. One of your developer coworkers is going to say, I want to see what Anson has done. I want to see if I approve it or not. So he's going to compare My Awesome Feature to master and see all the differences that I've made, everything I've done over the last few weeks. And he'll say, okay, it's good. Let's commit it and let's merge it in. And then that's how things become part of the official version. So it's a very controlled way of working, and it always leaves a paper trail of who did what and when. And and hopefully
So
why.
good luck playing a game of Clue with a bunch of computer programmers. They have a paper trail of what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my question is, well, I'm sure it's probably a joke people in the UK hear all the time, but you were talking about the program, and hopefully no one thinks that they're being insulted when they're referring to the VCS.
Yeah, it's the creator of it actually is English, I think. Or yeah, and he said he chose that word because that's what everyone thinks he is or something.
Oh.
Yeah, it was
That's
intentional.
Okay.
That's kind of funny. Yeah. So there's lots of ways to interact with Git. You can use the command line, which is just like what you see in Jurassic Park, where he's typing on the computer and all you see is text. That's kind of the most very basic way to do it. You would type something like git checkout master and hit enter, and it'll check out the master version. Or you can use a user interface, a GUI, a graphical user interface, which just means a fancy program that does things visually, and so it's easier to see the history. And when you have a history of all these branches coming together, everything, they call it the graph or the tree. And not actually the tree. The tree is like a different thing, but you see the graph, and it's kind of like shows you a pretty little history. So it's easier to see if you have like a picture of everything of how it all went down versus just like a bunch of text, So I'll try to put some screenshots in and show you what it looks like, or you can just Google it. But it's pretty cool.
Okay.
So yeah, I do use the terminal, the command line of the terminal quite a bit. I personally like to use the fish shell. There's also one called bash, which is the born again shell. But those are just like the ways that you interact with the underlying Unix system, which is what macOS is built on top of. Like Linux and macOS all share this common Unix foundation. So it means that you have a terminal that's very powerful, built into the system and everything. As far as actual Git clients that I personally like, I like to use, currently I'm using one called Sublime Merge, which is kind of pretty and fun to use. I also like GitUp a lot. And that's just for anybody who's listening who also happens to be a software developer or knows these kind of things, just for fun to name drop my kind of favorites. You might have heard of a website called GitHub. GitHub is a place that hosts Git repositories, and so a critical component of this is once you've made your changes on your own computer, you do what's called git push, and you push it to the server, and then anybody else who has access to the same repository can pull your changes down. And so that's how work gets shared. So everyone operates on the same version, and as long as you push, everybody else can pull and get the same copy of your stuff that you've done. So no copying and dragging files, no saving files as version number 2.txt. It's all taken care of by the version control system, and it's a very nice way to handle that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And GitHub is just a famous website that hosts a bunch of repositories. So if you have a project you're working on and you want to make it open source meaning the source code is open to the world and anybody can see it, you will make GitHub your server, and you say, okay, I'm going to create a new repository and I'm going to host it on GitHub. And that means that you push to GitHub, and then everybody can see what you've done on GitHub. And I'll include a link to my personal GitHub account where you can see like what I've posted on there.
Okay.
So that's kind of cool. Another tool that we use is a build server, also known as continuous integration, and this works with the VCS. So every time you push something, there's basically a computer sitting in an empty office that will detect that you've pushed something. It'll check it out, and it'll run the tests to make sure everything still works. And if something fails, if you broke something, it'll send you a message on chat and say, hey, you broke this. Go fix it before somebody else runs into the same problem. So
okay.
It's like a safety check to make sure that whatever you do, maybe it'll work just for you, but not for everybody else. So it's a safety check to make sure that everything is working together.
Okay.
And finally, the last piece of the puzzle is Apple tools like App Store Connect, which is how you upload your apps to the actual App Store and they get reviewed and everything. What's kind of funny is until very recently, it was known as iTunes Connect. And again, that shows you how important iTunes was to getting all this kind of stuff started. You would upload your app to iTunes Connect first, and then it would go to the App Store. It's kind of funny, but they finally renamed it and split it up and everything. So yeah, it's all about writing your stuff locally, sharing it with everybody else using a version control system, and then putting it up to the App Store. Yeah.
Cool.
I should also mention I also often have my headphones. That's another essential part of my gear, listening to music and stuff. So
Right.
yeah. So and of course we use we use Google Hangouts or Google Meet because we have a couple of different offices and people are across across Texas or across the U.S. And we also use Slack for our communication, which is just like a chat application. So we do a lot of talking online because not everybody's in the same place all the time. So those are the tools of the trade. And so let's say you're sitting down at your computer, you got Xcode open, and well, what do you do? How do you actually make the app? Well, you do it by programming or coding, and there's a huge everything that falls under software design or software engineering is kind of the study of how you put things together. How do you write code? How do you build a program out of just like typing a bunch of words? And so the way we do it is what's called you can kind of say abstractions on top of abstractions, and what that means is you will build one thing at a time that solves one kind of problem, and then you'll build another thing on top of it, and you'll completely forget about how you solve the first problem while you solve the second problem. And so it's like you focus on one certain thing at a time, and then you put those pieces together, and you get the end result.
Okay.
So kind of an easy way to explain this is, we were talking about the operating system earlier. When you're making an app, you don't reinvent the wheel. You don't write the code that tells you how to draw text on the screen. You use a framework that Apple provides that does that for you. On iOS, the framework is called Cocoa Touch, and on Macs, it's called Cocoa. And so when they had the iOS version, they called it Cocoa Touch, like for touch screens. And so this has a bunch of frameworks inside of it, such as Foundation and UIKit. And what you do is you use those pieces of code to do your pieces of code. And so what that means is if you want to put some text on the screen, you create a new UI view. You put a UI text field inside of it, and then you can say textfield.text equals hello world. And then you run that, and all you have to do is those couple lines of creating a view and putting your text in it. And then iOS will say, okay, I see you want me to draw a text field, you want me to put these words inside of it, and I'll do it. You don't have to do it all from scratch every time.
Okay.
Yeah, so Apple provides the very, very basic baseline. And so on top of that, you build your own custom stuff. And then on top of your custom stuff, you build your own, your own app out of all of that. So it's all about one thing at a time. A classic example is maybe for, if I'm going to build a calculator application, you try to have good design, you keep things as separate as possible and so as contained as possible. Because again, a lot of this software engineering is about managing complexity. You can have thousands of lines of code in one app, and how do you manage all this kind of stuff while you keep things organized? And so if you're going to build like a calculator application, first you want to have something that knows how to multiply, two numbers or whatever. And so you'll make a calculator class or a calculator object, and you'll give it a method or a function called multiply. And what a function is just something that takes inputs and gives you outputs. And so this multiply function will take in two numbers, and it'll produce one output for you. And so that's a very basic unit of your code. And then what you'll do is something called unit testing, which means you will test this function just by itself. And so you'll write some tests, and you'll say, if I multiply 2 and 2, I should get 4. If I multiply 3 and 4, I should get 12. And you'll build up this, it's called a test suite, where it has a bunch of different tests in it. And you hit your Command U, your keyboard shortcut, to run your tests, and it'll execute all of the single tests that you've put together and make sure that everything passes. So if your multiply function doesn't work properly, your test will catch it and it'll let you know.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's all about, like I said, one thing at a time. And then whenever you focus heavily on writing your tests before you write the code, that's called test-driven development. So for example, let's say I wanted to have a function do something like convert Celsius to Fahrenheit, and maybe it was something that I wasn't super sure how to do yet. What I would do is I would write a very stupid function that would just, whenever you gave it Celsius, it would just return the same number back to you, even though it's not Fahrenheit. You just for now, to get something written, you write return the exact same thing that I got. And then you write some unit tests that say, okay, if I have Celsius, I want this Fahrenheit. And you'll write a few unit tests with those numbers just to make sure that you know what's expected, and then you go and write the actual function and say, now that I have something to test against, I'm going to write my code so it passes the tests. And then that kind of thing of like making sure that you always start with the test first, so you always have a clear expectation of what you want, is called test-driven design. Does that kind of make sense?
It's interesting. I mean, I'm trying to absorb all of this like an anxious sponge.
Yeah,
and,
it's all kind of abstract. It's kind of hard to see unless you write it out. But
yeah. And I'm sure you're being very generous and condensing, your whole degree's worth of knowledge into a very short podcast episode. But it just to me, listening to how because I've heard my dad tell me, well, my parents, I guess, even in high school and college, when they talk about the programming or the computer classes they took, and they actually had to use punch cards to write code.
Yeah.
And what you're describing on how you make an app and how you go about it, it sounds, I mean, I'm not that I'm a linguist or I'm not an anthropologist, so I don't quite know exactly how language came about. I'm sure a lot of trial and error and a lot of grunting and people hitting each other when they didn't understand. But it seems more, I don't know. It seems kind of like an alien way of constructing a language. Like it's all artificial. It's all machine. And in order for it to do what you want it to do, you can't just talk to a computer yet at this point. Whatever it's going to be like in 30 years from now, where I'm just like, all right, computer, write this line of code.
Yeah.
And then it just comes back and spits it out. Whereas you have to be like, I have to do this dumb test to make sure it understands what I'm trying to do. And then once it's done it a couple times, whenever you type in this, you should get this.
Yeah.
And then the computer understands what you're trying to tell it.
Right. It's not so much the computer understanding, it's that you writing the right code to make the right thing happen. The computer won't do anything unless you tell it to. And so the unit tests are not for the computer, they're for you. They're for your sanity. Because when there's bugs, it's not the computer's fault most of the time. It's the human's fault, That's why it's so tricky to get something done. I have the question in here, like, how long does it take to build an app? Somebody might ask that. Oh, how long does it take to build an app, Anson? And it's like, well, how long does it take to learn a piece of music? Well, it depends on the music, and it depends on what you're going to do with it.
Your skill level.
Yeah. It's not like...
And your skill level, right.
It's not like making a sandwich where you just plop one thing on top of the other and then it's done. So, I mean... yeah, exactly right. It takes, back in the day where you used to... sorry, I'm getting my points mixed up here.
And I'm hearing train whistles in the background.
Yeah, we do.
Did you hear Mo pawing at the door earlier?
No, I did not.
Okay, then he was light of feet and did not pick it up then.
Yeah. So the unit testing is all about making sure you're writing the right thing. And also, if somebody else comes along and changes your code later, and make sure that they didn't break your code either. So it's a way of kind of recording what's expected out of this code.
Johnson, messing with my code again?
Yep, you gotta watch out for that guy.
Yeah.
You can tell exactly who did it because it's all recorded in the VCS too.
Right.
So unit testing is about writing down your expectations and then making sure you're doing the right thing. Because the computer will only do what you told it to, nothing more, nothing less. So, like I was saying about the abstractions thing, punch cards, it's a very physical way of saying, which bits you want on or off to encode the instructions to do certain things at a time. So, whereas, your parents are punching cards or whatever, and encoding the bits into the punch cards, instead, I would type a single word into Xcode or into my text editor, and that gets translated into those bits. And so I can type words faster than they could punch holes in bits. And so we've built upon the layer of we've taught the computer how to translate the words that I type into those bits. And so now that problem is solved, I can get to a higher level problem of writing a program using those commands. You see how that works?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing with your own program. Yeah.
So how soon until We have artificially intelligent machines, and when can I get beamed in like in Tron?
It's very hard to say that. That's the unfortunate part.
Okay.
Yeah, computers are good at...
Because the bits in the original Tron, it was like that little floating thing in the air that would go like, yes, 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 no, 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 yes, yes, yes.
I saw Tron Legacy, but I never saw the original Tron either.
Oh, dude, you got to see the original Tron. That I think because we talked about it before with our Westworld stuff. That was the first movie to use computer animation in the movie, and yeah, I fight for the users. Yeah, no, Tron's great. Maybe I do need to get you a Christmas present. I just need to get you a DVD copy of Tron, the original one. That's got young Jeff Bridges in it.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, Studley Muffin, Jeff Bridges.
So let's see. What else was I going to say? Yeah, there are some people. It's all an art form too. You know, there's no rule that says you have to write unit tests, and if you're completely confident and you never make mistakes, then you can write your temperature conversion functions without having any unit tests. But personally, I think it's worth taking the time to make sure you're being specific and make sure you're not making any mistakes, because that's what I'm saying. Like, the human error is what causes things not to work. So you could be like Top Gun, where you think you're a hotshot pilot. You don't have to do unit tests. You can buzz the tower, and then that's when they're like, Maverick. They're gonna spill the guy's coffee all over the place. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So, like you said, we have to specify everything very manually. You got to tell the computer exactly what to do. Same with the interface. You can use what Xcode has called Interface Builder, and you can build a little storyboard where you drag text fields out onto the thing, and you change their color and change how they're lined up and everything. Or you can do that in code if you want to. If you prefer typing out code, you can just say, new text view, or and then set the properties that way in code. But could have multiple options, but you do have to specify everything very manually. And then, so there's, you'll create your views to present things. You'll create your what are called models, which are like things that hold the data or do the calculations and stuff like that. And then you have to have something to persist your data, meaning to save it somehow. Apple has a technology called Core Data that we use to save things to disk. And so when your phone, if you quit the app or it gets kicked out of memory, it'll still be there when you wake it back up again. So there's a lot to learn, but at the same time, if you just want to build an app and see it run, you can download Xcode, create a new project, and do their single view template, and then give it a name, hit save, and then hit run, and it's done in 15 seconds. So you can get something working very quickly, but getting something that you want that does something interesting is what takes a long time.
Okay.
So
even a moron like me, I could download this stuff and then just go beep boop beep on a keyboard, and then be like, dance monkey dance, and then it might spit something out. But otherwise, if I don't take the schooling, the time, the talent in order to systematically address all the parts, then I'm not going to have a good app.
Yeah. So. That's the thing. It takes time. It's like learning a piece of music. You can. That's why software always has updates. Nothing is ever done. Nothing is ever perfect. We can always improve what we've done. And again, humans are not perfect, so no one's ever going to make a perfect application the first time.
So speaking, since it's Thanksgiving time, and this reminds me, pretty much in choir, every Thanksgiving, my choir at college, we always did excerpts from Handel most years.
Yeah.
And so the big story that Dr. Lee, she would always share with us about Handel's Messiah is that he basically locked himself in his room or his house, and he wrote that thing in a super fast amount of time, and it was all it was for a children's orphanage benefit, and it ends up being one of the most transcendent pieces of music that's ever been written. So my question is there anybody that exists currently, or was there someone who was alive that was a Handel that could just write out code real fast, never test it, and run it, and then people are just oh my gosh, this is so amazing?
That's a good question.
Do you know of anyone that exists like that?
That's a good question.
Do they have contests for that where they're just like, write an app, but you can't test it. You just have to do it in one shot?
Well, they have things, like hackathons, but there's no provision against testing. You could if you go to like some kind of hackathon, it's like, oh, you have, one 24-hour period to make something from scratch, and then you can test it as much as you want during that time, but it's a limited time, so maybe you wouldn't spend as much time on testing if you just want to get something out the door faster,
Okay.
Maybe it wouldn't be pretty, but it would like do something kind of cool. So, yeah, I don't know. It's not something that's really, personally, speed is, it's a trade-off, If you're going to be fast, it doesn't mean you're going to be good. And
Okay.
I'd rather be on the little slower side, but always produce good things. If you're really fast, let's say, we have our QA department, like I said, and everything that you do has to go through QA first. And if you make something that doesn't work all the way, or it's kind of crappy, or you rushed it, you send it to QA, they test it, and they say, hey, I found these problems. You say, okay, whatever. You fixed it as fast as you can, get it back to them. They say, hey, well, I found these problems, and you fixed it as fast as you can. That cycle can go on forever. So I personally prefer to take the time, So speed is something that's helpful if you're trying to get a prototype out. Like, oh, what can we do that's something cool and new? You can, try something out. But then after you have a prototype and you say, yes, this is cool, let's make it good. Then you take the time to refine it, polish it up, make it look good, and then ship it.
Okay, so you definitely do not have the need for speed, and you're not gonna shake and bake, and I'm not gonna drive fast. I'm not gonna go fast. If I don't go fast, if you're not first, you're last.
Yeah,
you're not gonna do any of that.
Yeah, there's a saying that I think Facebook used to have called "move fast and break things," but it's kind of reckless. I think.
Bull in a china shop.
Yeah. So it's important to like have that spirit, kind of have the adventurous spirit of like wanting to try new things and like come up with new ideas and try things out quickly. But if you're going to have a solid app that's used long term by customers, you have to have a high focus on quality too. That's why we have a good quality QA team that we rely on heavily to make sure we're doing our job. And it's a good partnership that we have. So yeah. Did I answer that question? So.
Yeah. I'm just.
The last thing that I'll kind of mention is there's always ways to get help too. So these frameworks that I mentioned, Cocoa Touch and UIKit and stuff, they're all documented. So you can go online to Apple's official documentation and learn and read about how you're supposed to use the stuff. And so they'll say, okay, if you want to use the UI text field, this is the properties you can set on it. This is how it works. So it's not just all mystery to you. It's all laid out how you're supposed to use it, how it works. And there's always, you can just Google it. There are websites that have answers to questions. There's a famous one called Stack Overflow, which is where people will famous. It's kind of infamous. You can be like, oh, I'm just gonna Google my answer, Google my problem, find the first result on Stack Overflow, and copy paste the code to my app. That's kind of a sloppy way to do it, but it's a good resource to go see what problems people are having and how you can solve it. Or if you're trying to learn something, like I was doing something new in C++ recently, and I'm like, well, I don't really know a lot about it. I'm trying to learn a lot, so I spent a lot of time on Stack Overflow, reading questions and answers about things that I didn't know and trying to figure out how stuff works.
Is this Stack Overflow? It's not like Yahoo question and answers, is it? It's not like bad bottom of the barrel. I'm questioning your human intelligence. Why are you asking these kinds of questions?
No, it's pretty good. There is it's the same format. You'll have questions and answers and everything, but it's pretty high quality usually. Or you can tell. If there's a lot of votes on something, it'll be good. If there's not a lot of votes or some disagreements, you'll see in the comments and stuff.
Okay.
What's interesting is there's lots of stacks. I have to read their history. Don't quote me on this, but I think they started as just a programming thing. Because Stack Overflow is a programming term for when you run out of memory and you overflow your stack. It's like an error thing that happens. And so there's their network of sites is called Stack Exchange, and what that means is there are like question and answers built up for tons of things. They have like a gaming, a puzzles, parenting, professionalism, writing, grammar, all this kind of stuff. And I'm sure there's like a fantasy, so people ask questions like, oh, why did this happen? Or people ask like, oh, in Spider-Man Homecoming, why did this happen and not this? And then people will discuss the answer, So it's kind of like a more refined Yahoo answer sort of thing. So
Okay.
it's pretty cool site. You can find lots of things on there. I'm sure you might have seen something on there. If you Google something about D&D, maybe there's somebody who's asked the same question about this or that D&D version.
I have D&D question stuff, but I think different websites pop up. It'll So not Stack Overflow per se,
Right.
but you find I'm trying. I can picture the website right now where you ask a question and then it votes. You vote on the answers, and the really good answers will quote stuff like from the player's handbook, or they'll be like, well, according to this unearthed arcana, you can use this rule, blah, 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 and, stuff like that.
Yeah, I just found one, actually. It's rpg.secexchange.com. The first one I saw is, it's tagged D&D 5th edition, and it says, can I defeat Strahd von Zarovich by stuffing him in a bag of holding and then tearing it?
So that's a good question.
Somebody asked this crazy question, and then there are some answers. People, citing the rule books and trying to figure that out. So,
pro tip, adventurers: do not place a portable hole inside of a bag of holding unless you want to be sucked into the astral plane and lose everything.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yep. Yeah, no, especially if you want to come up with some elaborate doomsday devices, you just threaten, I'm going to make basically a astral portal dimensional bomb with these two common magic items.
That's funny, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty much all I have. It was a whirlwind tour of software development. I got a little preachy about unit testing for a little bit of history.
Yeah.
So...
Well, I'm just ready. I'm just ready for Jarvis to show up in my life. Hopefully now, maybe 30 years from now in the future, we'll have like our own Jarvis. I know we've already got these personalities like Microsoft has Cortana from the Halo games, and Apple has Siri, and Google has. Google has. I think it's just Google. I don't know if the Google one has a name.
Yeah, the Google Assistant.
Google Assistant. Okay. Not very well thought. And then you've got Amazon Alexa.
Yeah.
So I'm sure everybody's devices have all turned on now that I've said those names out loud.
Alexa, play blank tape.
Yeah. Let's see if it does that. I think I tried that. I think we have our set to whenever you tell it echo.
Right.
But I don't think it's been able to find it. So that must mean we probably need more reviews on Apple iTunes podcast thing, so that way people can find it and it gets popular, and then Alexa Echo will actually be able to find us.
I think if I asked,
or your Google Assistant or something.
If I asked my phone to play it, I might have it. I'm going to try it.
Sure.
Hey Siri, play blank tape.
Okay, one moment. Okay, blank tape podcast now playing.
To the right. And what you do is you put all these...
Hey, that's us!
There we go.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
There you go. Apple leading the charge. So how long until we develop the blank tape app, the hit app that's going to be entertaining people for years to come?
Oh, gosh. See, I don't think we need an app because...
You're right. We're too cool. We don't need an app.
All you need is a podcast player of your choice.
Exactly. Overcast, Apple Podcasts. Hopefully you're listening to us on either of those.
Yeah. I think I have a challenge for you. I'm going to look up some kind of...
oh, boy.
I'm going to look up some kind of coding online thing, and I'm going to see if I can get you to take a little coding class. I'm sure since you did computer science in high school, I'm sure it'll come back to you. It's not, it's like riding a bicycle, it'll get back into it. Maybe I'll try to send a little challenge your way or something.
That would, it sounds daunting, but it probably wouldn't be bad. Considering if you have any type of coding experience, people's ears perk up, and it certainly makes resumes look nice when you're like, coding?
Yeah. Never leave a door, never Never. What am I trying to say? Open the doors that you can.
Let my love open the door. Ooh, my love open the door.
Remember in Dan in Real Life when he sings that?
And which one?
Dan in Real Life when Michael Scott.
Oh, Dan in Real Life. Yeah. Yeah, actually, Peter Hedges wrote that. He was the director or screenwriter for that.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and so I met that director because his father, the Reverend Bob Hedges, lived in San Angelo. He was the Episcopalian priest in town, and he was involved on the San Angelo Symphony Board, and he was a fraternity brother in Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia. And so when Father Bob passed, they had his funeral in San Angelo. And so I had heard about Peter Hedges, who's the director, but you might know him, because he did the movie The Secret Life of Timothy Green. And, his big one, that he wrote the screenplay or the book for, What's Eating Gilbert Grape?
Yeah.
With Johnny Depp and young Leo DiCaprio. Mm-hmm. And if you watch that movie, the funeral scene in that movie with the pastor presiding, that's actually Father Bob in the movie.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. Yeah, so Peter Hedges, Dan in Real Life, I've met him, and he's a super nice guy. His movies are pretty cool, and his son, Lucas, is now starting to get that acting buzz. I know he was in that Manchester by the Sea movie that came out the other year, and he's about to be in something new. That's something big that's coming out. So yeah, if you start seeing the Hedges name pop up, I guess if you were playing the 6 Degrees of Separation challenge, then you could be like, hey, by extension, I know that guy.
This is why I get my movie recommendations from you, and always have and always will, because you know all these things.
Yep, it's because that's what I nerd out about. So.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for listening to me, and if you have any questions, let me know for next time or something. Hope it all kind of gels and makes sense and is useful and interesting on some level.
Yeah. And listeners out there, since we have been talking about technology, we hope that you're accessing us through your technology, whether that is by iTunes podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts, whether that's Overcast, whether you're going to our website, blanktape.show. And be sure to be following us on Twitter and Facebook. I mean, I know we're just, like we said, we're two dudes that just talk about random things. But we started off this podcast as just an idea of like, hey, we're getting older. Let's try this out and do it. And I think, Anson, you would agree that this has been a fun endeavor, and I hope to keep this going. And I want to keep trying new things, and I want to interview more people, and I want to talk about all kinds of different subjects. And I know we've got some stuff cooking for our next season, volume 2. And, any thoughts on that?
Agree 100%. And we are thankful for you listeners.
Yes, on this Thanksgiving, as we are all very thankful for our families, our friends, where we live, and just all the good things we've got going in life. We, Anson and I, Blank Tape, we are thankful for you listening, and hope you have a great time with your friends and family as we're starting to get closer to the end of the year. I do know that we're going to have a special end of the year wrap up episode where I'll get to be live with Anson. Mm-hmm. And so we'll actually be in the same room. So hopefully that episode will be able to get out a lot sooner, right shortly after Christmas, right?
Yeah, I have to check the schedule, but I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so that way you'll be able to spend your 12 days of Christmas listening to our podcast and ringing in the new year as you wait for all of our cool stuff we've got planned for the new year. And, I'll try and be working on some coding homework or something during that time.
Well, take your time. You have a few months if you're anything like me, so don't worry about it.
I've got a lot of testing to do to make sure that it actually works.
Sounds good.
All right.
See you next time.
Adios. and I saluted the computer as I said that.